Hello everyone, this is Scarzig, and welcome back to Budget Hero. Last episode we played a few matches, and those kind of dragged on longer than I thought that they would, so we really didn't get a chance to go in depth the way I wanted to about actually crafting the cards that we're going to need to bolster our decks here in the beginning, and just go over exactly what we're working with so far, and some good options that we'll have individually for each faction. So I thought that what I'd do to start off is before we look at the new cards that we got last time and disenchant what we don't need, we're going to quickly go over, and I guess that it is better if I show off the basic decks that I'm working with right now. So this Magmar one, we have 3 Greater Fortitude. It's an excellent buff spell, +2/+2, lets your minion survive when it otherwise wouldn't. And here's the thing. When your minion survives, it's going to basically deal its full attack points to whatever else needs to trade into it, or it's going to need to eat an additional removal, and that's what makes Greater Fortitude so good. We've got 2 Ephemeral Shrouds here in this deck, which I believe is uniform across the board. 2 Ephemeral Shroud, 3 Healing Mystic. We've got 2 Phalanxar, and I was running this just sort of for kicks. It's Getting Phalanxar to stick on the board at 1 HP can pay off for you, but it's just so inconsistent, and you need young Silithar. But we were just running him just because. We've got 3 Rock Pulverizer in this deck because it has great synergy with Greater Fortitude, and if we can lock our opponent down, Phalanxar has a higher chance of sticking around, and then we can start wailing on our opponent with Adamantite Claws, right? Because then they'll be stuck in place for 1 turn dealing with the Rock Pulverizer. We've got 3 Veil Hunters, just to give us some better 2-drops, and to give us a bit more diversity when it comes to threats. Magmar can't really deal with ranged units too well, so by developing a ranged unit of our own, we can take down our opponent's Hearth Seekers and whatnot. We've got 2 Primordial Gazers here. I think in this deck, since it is so buff-focused, and like face focused with the Greater Fortitudes and the Adamantite Claws and the Saberspine Tigers, you probably could get away with running 3 of these. It's just that it's really slow if you happen to draw one of these when you don't have a board. So the Primordial Gazer, I think having 2 is a good balance, but you could get away with 3. Great synergy with Veil Hunter as well. We've got 2 Repulsor Beasts. This just acts as removal for us since we really don't have much else. Saberspine Tiger, again, really solid. Good synergy with Greater Fortitude. Makes it a 5/4, and that increases the chance that it will survive whatever you want it to rush into, and then it'll be able to attack again. So you get kind of an Elucidator out of it. And the Elucidator, just to quickly touch on that, I think we'll have to open up the crafting menu, I think, to actually look at it. Yeah, the Elucidator is a 5/4 rush minion for 4. That deals 4 damage to your general as a payoff for being so crazy out-of-hand stat efficient. We've got 3 Hailstone Golems, 3 Primus Shield Masters, and 2 Young Flame Wings. This kind of harkens back to our face style I was just talking about. We've got 2 Necroseers to give ourselves a bit of card draw because we are going to be comboing a lot with Primordial Gazer and Saberspine Tiger, that sort of thing, and this just kind of tops off our curve. And we do have a Plasma Storm. This is one of Magmar's basic cards, but it's not overly useful at early stages. This is more of a tech card. Plasma Storm is really, really strong versus Vitruvian, can come in handy versus Songhai most of the time, but we just have the 1 copy because it'll come in handy if it comes in handy, but it's not something that you're actually going to be relying on too heavily. If you do find yourself running into a lot of matchups like Vitruvian, maybe Abyssian, where you do want this board clear, then you could cut maybe a Necroseer and put in a second Plasma Storm just to help you out. This sort of, again, acts as pseudo AoE for us. It is AoE, but I mean to say that it acts as a board clear in that we don't have Mecantor War Beast, which is one of Magmar's key cards that they do need. You don't actually need to craft very much when you're playing Magmar because their base cards are generally good. You want to pick up the Young Silithars. Those are only commons. I did get 1 in the packs I opened, so that's really good. So just craft a couple of those, and this is only if you're focusing on Magmar. the Young Silithars are really key to pick up, and the Mecantor War Beasts are really key to pick up. This is one of the best cards in the game, one of Magmar's best cards. Still, a 6-mana 4/4 with Frenzy Rush lets you go face, lets you clear out your opponent's board, and it lets you punish them so hard if they group up their units and they aren't playing around this card properly. When you're playing against Magmar and they're about to hit 6 mana, you basically want to always assume that they have one of these. And even if they don't, just being in the habit of playing around it and expecting it is going to let you take it's going to let you diminish the value that the Mecantor Warbeast is going to get, which sometimes it can just blow you out and you'll lose the game if you forget about this thing and you have all your units clustered up. So those are the two key cards that you want to get. First off, Earth Sphere is actually really nice to pick up, because you saw actually in the match I played in the other episode where it really came down to the wire because me and my opponent were going face, and even in aggressive Magmar decks, you could probably get away with including a couple copies of Earth Sphere just to top yourself off. If you already have the board, then it just puts you more ahead, and the 8 health can sometimes just buy you an extra turn, and that'll allow you to get into the higher mana costs and start dropping more minions, bigger threats, more combos, that sort of thing. Not too high priority, I would say, but Earth Sphere is pretty much universally used in any Magmar deck. So I think having 2 copies should suffice, and it is only a common. So if you're focusing on Magmar, you're most likely going to have that additional spirit, and this is going to be the way to go. If you're going super aggressive, if you really like that style, getting the Elucidators might be a good option as well, but because they're rare, they're a bit more expensive, and that will be more specialized, right? If you were going to craft rare units, you could probably get away with getting the Sunsteel Defenders. Because this is a neutral card, you can use this in more decks, and Sunsteel Defender is just generally useful. The reason it's so good in Magmar, though, is because of Flash Reincarnation. The next minion you summon this turn costs 2 less and takes 2 damage. The way Flash Reincarnation works, though, Sunsteel Defender's Force Field actually absorbs that 2 damage, so you get to combo Flash Reincarnation with the Sunsteel Defender, and then you get to play a 4/3 for 2 mana that has Force Field. It's a two card combo. It can get you really massive tempo if your opponent can't immediately deal with it. And when you bring out a minion like this so early in the game, or you combo it alongside another threat, your opponent might not be able to immediately deal with the Sunsteel Defender. So before you get your Elucidators, Sunsteel is definitely the way to go, especially if you are lucky enough to open a Flash Reincarnation in a pack. But that combo is just super duper good, super strong for Magmar. And the other card I wanted to quickly touch on here for Magmar is actually from the Shim'Zar set, and that would be Thumping Wave. It's another rare, so it's not too expensive. It is 100 spirit to craft, but if you get a legendary that you're not going to use, then it's really easy to get the spirit for Thumping Wave. You might only want maybe 2 copies, because you can transform your opponent's minions into a 3/3. It acts as a pseudo removal for you, and if you need to burst your opponent down, that buff giving something +5 attack can let you beef up your Mecantor Warbeast if you're at 9 mana. More than likely you'll place this on something that's happened to stick to the board, or combo this with Saberspine Tiger. So that is another solid option to pick up as well. So moving on, our next basic deck we have is Vanar. We've got 3 Aspect of the Fox, 2 Dragon Larks, 2 Chromatic Colds, 3 Crystal Cloakers, 2 Frost Fires, 3 Healing Mystics, 2 Rock Pulverizers, 2 Veil Hunters, 3 Fenrir War Masters, 2 Repulsor Beasts, 3 Saberspine Tiger, 3 Snowpiercer. This is actually about along the same lines as Magmar, right? Because you have your buffs, and then you have your artifact to go face with, and then you're just bringing the Saberspine Tigers and whatnot along with it. And then, of course, we've got the 3 Hailstone Golem, 3 Primus Shield Master, a couple Young Flamewing, and then the Arctic Displacer. This card, standalone isn't that great. It's just that at lower levels of play, your opponent is less likely to be able to deal with this thing, right? As a 10-4, most generally your opponent's going to be able to find 4 damage or a way to deal with this thing. But at, again, lower levels of play, it has a higher chance of sticking around, so this can really close out a game for you, especially if you ramp into 5 mana and get it out kind of early. So really not too much to say about this deck. It's just really straightforward. Aspect of the Fox is really, really good, and it's one of Vanar's basic cards. Let's quickly get into some of the options I have picked out for them. They're high priority crafting cards that you're going to want to get your hands on. You do want to get, oh, I have to click the crafting button, excuse me. I do have Snow Chaser on this list. You could probably get away with just a couple copies of this because it comes back to your hand and you can repeatedly use it. It acts as pseudo card draw, which generally speaking Vanar does lack. Well, out of all the stuff they have in faction, they don't have any true card draw. So Snow Chaser lets you get extra value out of your hand. Once you unlock Kara, you could probably get away with just running this general. Kara Winterblade, because of her Bloodborne spell, to give every minion in her hand +1/+1. I think everybody is pretty much familiar with the strength of this general. She makes really solid use of a lot of basic cards that you're going to have already, like Bloodtear Alchemist, Maw, Saberspine Tiger is a basic card that everybody has 3 copies of and has access to, and is one of Kara's win conditions. So this is a solid choice, and Snow Chaser fits perfectly into that deck, but it's just an all-around really good Vanar card. The cards that I have picked out here do sort of take into account playing either or general in this case. We do have Hearth Sister on the list. This is one of the best playmaking cards in the game. A 3/2 that lets you switch positions with any other minion. The utility for this thing is just, it's almost endless. You can bring one of your own minions. You can bring that Arctic Displacer down from the corner into the fight to finish off your opponent. You can use the Hearth Sister to swap one of your opponent's minions farther away from you so you can create distance. You can bring that pesky ranged unit that your opponent summoned close into the battle and then take it out. Hearth Sister is just really, really solid. Great for making plays. You can get your own Crystal Cloakers into infiltrate range. You can place something in the same column as the enemy general, and then the Warbird Bloodborne spell can get extra value that way. This thing is just ridiculous. So get 3 copies of Hearth Sister right off the bat, and it's a common, so you're going to have the spirit for that. Another card that you might want to pick up or consider would be Hailstone Prison. 2 copies of that is always good. It's a solid pickup. Learning how to use this effectively takes a little bit of time, but if you just stick with my opponent summons something big, I'll use Hailstone Prison to send it back to their hand, and then they have to spend the mana again to resummon it. It's generally the way you want to go. And there's some nuances with using this card properly that you'll pick up pretty quickly, hopefully, and pretty good removal. Mark of Solitude might be an interesting option to pick up, especially for early levels of play. And if you're focusing specifically on Vanar and you have the extra spirit, just to touch on this real quick, Mark of Solitude transforms a unit into a 5/5. And it gains the ability that it cannot attack enemy generals. And if the unit is dispelled, it loses that ability, and it is able to attack enemy generals, but it keeps the transformation, the stat change, to becoming a 5/5. So you can summon a Veil Hunter, hit it with the Mark of Solitude. It becomes a 5/5 ranged unit that can't attack generals, but then you just have this huge unit that's just killing whatever your opponent summons. You can play it on the Rock Pulverizer, so it becomes a 5/5 provoke unit that your opponent has to deal with. If your opponent summons something that's way too big for you to deal with, that's going to really cream you next turn, you can actually play the Mark of Solitude on your opponent's minion, and then it can't attack you. It can't attack generals. So that card also has a lot of utility. So that's another one that you might want to pick up, but it's not super duper important for Vanar. This card used to be meta for Vanar, but it's kind of fallen out of favor with Kara just being able to make the 5/5s right before she brings them out. And lastly, well, not lastly, I should say, you want to pick up Cryogenesis. You get these alongside the Snow Chasers, and then as a 3-mana spell that deals 4 damage to an enemy minion, this is pretty much going to be the removal that you want. And then it takes care of most anything that you're going to have a problem dealing with, and then it's going to draw a Snow Chaser from your deck, or a Crystal Cloaker or something. If you want to make really good use of Cryogenesis, you replace the unit, the Vesper unit that's in your hand, then you play Cryogenesis, and then you just redraw the Vesper unit that you replaced. That way, you get the card that you replaced that minion for, and then you get the minion right back. So that's a really good play overall. Cryogenesis, high priority crafting for Vanar. Razorback is also on this list. Give all friendly minions +2 attack. We kind of saw the strength of an ability like this when I played Soul Shatter Pact in that last episode, and it has a pretty decent body all on its own. It's a 4/3, and yeah, if you happen to open a Jack's True Sight, which is a legendary, it's a ranged unit that summons 1/1 ranged units in each corner, and this combos with Razorback. It's one of Vanar's most fun combos, one of their main win conditions that they've had since forever, and it's still pretty viable even with Blistering Scorn in the game. Another card I wanted to quickly touch on might be Wailing Overdrive, because it is a common. This is from the Shim'Zar set. It is a common, so if you're focusing on Vanar and you're going for a really aggressive deck, you could probably get away with running this. You give a friendly minion on your opponent's starting side of the battlefield, which is anything that's infiltrated. It doesn't necessarily have to have infiltrate, but it's the same area of the board they're talking about in this card. You give it +5/+5. So this will combo with your Saberspine Tigers. This is going to let you get extra use out of your Hearth Sisters. You swap something into infiltrate range, and then the Wailing Overdrive will buff it into a +5/+5, and then you can slap something. It's important to note that the minion keeps this buff if it leaves infiltrate range. It just needs to be on your opponent's starting side of the battlefield to receive the buff, and then it gets to keep it no matter where it moves after that. So wanted to quickly put that out there, and that is the main high priority crafts you want for Vanar. Moving on to the Abyssians. This faction I touched on a lot last episode, because I think out of all the games I played with these basic decks, Abyssian was the one that actually gave me the most difficulty. I was actually really sweating during that game to try to pull out the win. Soul Shatter Pact, really OP. We had Shadow Watcher, and we kind of had the setup for it, but it still felt really bad, because when you develop the Shadow Watcher, you're kind of putting all of your eggs in one basket, and that's something I typically don't like to do. But anyway, to move on to the... I could have sworn I had a Shadow Reflection in this deck. Yeah, I think... Did I ever even play these Necroseers? I think we'd want to take out the Bright Moss Golems and just put in Shadow Reflection. That's right, I opened a Shadow Reflection, but this was one that was on my list to craft, so we do want to... Shadow Reflection is definitely on our list. Pick up 2 copies of this, because you can cast it on a Wraithling and then burst for 6 damage. Combos with Saberspine Tiger, Veil Hunter, etc. Shadow Reflection is really good for getting that burst damage. You'll notice a common thread that these basic decks, these early decks, are all very aggressive, because an aggressive deck is a very straightforward and easy to achieve style. You're going to be playing around what your opponent's doing somewhat, but this just gives you a straightforward win condition, something that you can focus on. And a lot of the cards that go towards building an aggressive deck are ones that you have immediate access to, or are very, very cheap. Just to call more attention to Saberspine Tiger, right? Because that combos with so many cool buffs in the game. A lot of the early artifacts, like I had pointed out, Snowpiercer and Adamantite Claws, just really focus in on that style of deck until we're able to bolster our collections fully and try out some more what's the word I'm looking for? Some more polished decks, I guess we could say. But to get into what Abyssian needs, your high priority crafts for this faction are going to be the Blood Moon Priestess. Um, this card, it's a 4 mana 3/3, and whenever something dies, this is friendly or enemy units, you summon a Wraithling on a random nearby space. And getting a Blood Moon Priestess set up and then having things die really lets you spiral the game out of control. Because once Blood Moon Priestess stays on the board, when the Wraithlings that it summons die, then Blood Moon Priestess is just going to summon another Wraithling on top of that. It gives you infinite Wraithlings, essentially. Um, so Blood Moon Priestess and Shadow Dancer are two high priority crafts. We're going to be focusing on Lilith for Abyssian because a lot of the stuff that goes into Shadow Nova base decks like Obliterate goes to Azalea, and you kind of want Shadow Sister Kaleno to make that deck work. These cards are really strong, but they're very expensive. So a lot of people have brought up concerns that the Shadow Creep is such an integral deck type for Abyssian, and the Shim'Zar expansion really bolstered the that deck type, right? They wanted to make it a greater thing, and they gave it more synergy, and they wanted to make it a bit more interactive. But all the cards that they released for the new rebalanced Shadow Creep, new players just can't get their hands on. So we're going to be focusing on Swarm Abyssian, essentially. When you get your Shadow Dancers and your Blood Moon Priestesses set up, it just creates this this self-powering engine that just heals you, whittles down your opponent, and that really plays to one of Abyssian's major themes, right? Taking advantage of Death Watch and swarming the opponent with a lot of small units. Let's see. I already talked about Shadow Reflection. Ritual Banishing is another card that is really good for Abyssian. I should say Lilith, because her Bloodborne spell to spawn 2 Wraithlings for 1 mana, you can actually use your Bloodborne spell to spawn a Wraithling, use Ritual Banishing to kill one of the Wraithlings that you just spawned to kill your opponent's minion. So you end up with net +1 Wraithling on the board, and you get to kill something that your opponent summoned, which is 1 mana less than Dark Transformation, which does the same thing. And that's why you're going to want to pick up Ritual Banishing as well. That is a very high priority craft for removal. And a couple other units that I wanted to quickly mention as well would be Jaxi for Abyssian. It's a 1/1 unit that when it dies, it summons another 1/1 unit. So it lets you kind of double dip with the Death Watch, and having a 1/1 ranged unit that moves itself to the corner for you is really good. Gives you great synergy with Soul Shatter Pact or Shadow Reflection. So that's a good card to pick up on the side if you're focusing on Abyssian. And Shiro Puppy Dragon is the other. Oops, not Shito. Shiro. Shiro Puppy Dragon is another. This card is good in both Petruvian and Abyssian because they play a bit more of a swarmy style. But Shiro Puppy Dragon is a common, so it's really easy to pick these up. It's a generally good 2-drop. It's very solid, but it does have extra synergy, in my opinion, with Abyssian. But you could play this probably in any deck, so pick those up. That is another high-quality craft, and it's neutral. Just to quickly touch on it, I suppose, while we're going into it, might be Primus Fist. This is another common, solid 2-mana, 2/3, great opening for going first, and the giving a minion +2 attack just feeds into the aggro synergy. Also, might allow you to trade up into things as well. Really great for Abyssian because it lets you get more value out of Wraithlings, all that jazz. But it's good overall for pretty much any deck. Primus Fist is another high-quality craft in general. But we're going to get to that, I think. We'll get to the general ones. To move on to our next candidate, talking about high-priority crafts, we have Vitruvian. So in this faction, to go over what the basic deck I have built is 2 Dragon Marks, 3 Scion's First Wish, 2 Cosmic Flesh, 2 Ephemeral Shrouds, 3 Ethereal Obelisks, 3 Healing Mystics, 3 Pyromancers, 3 Scion Second Wish, 2 Staff of Akir, 2 Repulsor Beasts, 3 Saberspine Tiger, 2 Entropic Decay, 3 Hailstone Golem, 3 Primus Shieldmaster, and 3 Wind Shrikes. You'll see that this deck stops at 4 mana for its curve and relies on buffs to get more value out of our minions here. I already touched on Shiro Puppy Dragon and Primus Fist are both really great neutral cards to add to this deck, and to also touch on a lot of the really great Vitruvian high priority crafts that we would add. Siphon Energy is a really great card, and it is common, so you can pick up 3 of these very easily. It allows you to just dispel something, and because it costs 0 mana, it's not going to completely disrupt your plan for that turn. Siphon Energy lets you just, normally you kind of have to give up what your optimal play would be for the turn when you're trying to deal with one of your opponent's threats, but Siphon Energy lets you deal with something for free, essentially, to cancel out its annoying effect and still continue with your own strategy without being interrupted. Siphon Energy is a great card to pick up. I'm going to actually pull up Falcius here. He is from the Shim'Zar set, but it is only a common. This is one of the best 3-drops in the game, and it's one of Vitruvian's best cards that they got from Shim'Zar. A 3-mana 3/3 that gives your general +2 attacks, and your general takes no damage for the turn that you summon this. And this allows your general to go up to 4 attack very easily and just trade into something, control your opponent's board, and not take any damage back. That's huge value, enormous value. I would say that if you had to pick between Siphon Energy and Falcius, you actually want to get the Falcius first. To move on, another really strong choice that you can have for Vitruvian for crafting purposes would be, let me see, Starfire Scarab is a really great option. You saw in the last episode when I was playing Abyssian versus Vitruvian, these Starfire Scarabs were actually making me sweat really, really hard. Fortunately, I was lucky enough to have Dark Transformation both times to deal with this. But generally speaking, your opponent is not going to be able to deal with this right as a 4/6. And if they do, then whatever removal can deal with this usually costs a lot of mana. So it comes out sort of even, right? Because you use your turn, your 5 mana to play the Starfire Scarab, and they have to use between 3 and 5 mana usually to deal with it, and that takes up most of their turn. So it's not usually come out even or not too far behind if your opponent has a direct answer for it. And if you do get it to stick, then it just wreaks havoc on your opponent. Let me see. The other unit that I wanted to talk about is Pax. It's a 2/1 that when it dies, it summons 2 2/2s. And so this lets you get a lot of value onto the board right off the bat. If you're going first, you summon Pax, and then it dies to whatever your opponent summons next turn, then you start your next turn with 2 dervishes on board. So that's just really clutch. Especially if you're focusing on Vitruvian, Pax is one of the high priority crafting choices that you're going to want to grab for this faction. Because it is a rare, it costs 100 spirit each, but that's one legendary that you aren't going to use. Just disenchant that, and then you have your Paxes. Primus Fist, again, I just talked about. And to finish up with some lower priority crafting choices that are still pretty good for Vitruvian, you want to pick up Dunecasters because they are only commons, and they synergize really, really well with the Ethereal Obelisks and Pax. And they also have really good synergy with Fireblaze Obelisk, which is another priority that you're going to want to pick up for Vitruvian. And these are rare, so you probably want to get the Pax before you get the Fireblaze Obelisk, in my opinion. And then you can pick up the Dunecasters on the side because they're so cheap. Again, if you're focusing solely on Vitruvian, if that's the faction that you decided you wanted to stick with, it is a bit tougher to come up with all the spirit for these cards, but the power they give you is just so immense, I think, compared to what the other factions are actually dealing with at the moment. And the other cards that you see all the time from Vitruvian, like Amera Healers and Nimbus especially is really big in the meta. They're legendaries, and so you aren't going to have access to them for quite some time. Again, unless you are completely focusing on Vitruvian, Allomancer might be something you want to think about as well. So that covers it for Vitruvian, I'd say. I'm almost done, even though this video is getting pretty long. But I think that we'll just make this one really long informational video, and I'll put in some notes so you can skip around. But anyway, to move on to Lionar, we've got 2 Ephemeral Shroud, 3 Healing Mystic, 2 Rock Pulverizer. You can kind of see this is part of the core. 2 Veil Hunters, 3 Tempest, 3 Windblade Adept, 3 Divine Bond, 3 Martyrdom, 2 Repulsor Beast, 3 Saberspine Tiger, 3 Silverguard Knight, 3 Hailstone Golem, 2 Lycian Brawlers, 3 Primus Shield Masters, and 2 Bright Moss Golems. And this is just to take advantage of Divine Bond synergy with our really beefy guys. Lycian Brawler probably, on the whole, isn't as great as Primus Shield Master or Hailstone Golem. If you had to make the choice, you'd probably play one of those over Lycian Brawler. But if you can develop this guy on an empty board, or if you just know your opponent's not going to be able to deal with it, plopping one of these down can usually win you the game. Because it has celerity, you hit your opponent's face for 8 damage base, comboed with Argyon Highmane's Bloodborne spell to give it +2 attack. You're hitting your opponent for 12, and then if you combo with Divine Bond, you're hitting them for 16, and so the buffs just get like really out of control with this unit. And it gives us, you know, just that extra X factor, I suppose you could say, when it comes to building a deck that can just win you a game outright. If your opponent leaves this alone, or they don't respect this, or they can't deal with it, then it just comes through to just burst your opponent down and win you the game. We have 3 Tempest in the deck because this lets us deal with ranged units that Lionar has a bit of trouble with, and it also allows us to get in some extra face damage, which would normally be brought through for us with Holy Immolation. So overall, this is a pretty solid list. You could probably get away with cutting the Bright Moss Golems for something else if you wanted to add more 2-drops or more 3-drops or something, because these are a bit heavy, but they just have such great synergy with Divine Bond that you might as well have them in the deck, especially if you don't have Ironcliff Guardians. So to quickly get to what Lionar wants to craft, their high-quality crafting choices are going to be Azurite Lion. This is like the best 2-drop in the game. If your opponent does not deal with this, Azurite Lion will single-handedly win you the game. Because it's the way it stays alive and has celerity, it's able to position itself really, really well that your opponent can't deal with it. And because your opponent has a lower chance of being able to outright kill this thing, they'll have to waste a spell on it, so it eats removal if it is dealt with. And Azurite Lion allows you to take mana tiles early. If it stays alive, you can hit it with Roar to give it +2 attack, and then it starts getting into Lycian Brawler style synergies, right? Where all the buffs that you stack on it just become so ridiculous overall. Azurite Lion is priority numero uno, I would say, for Lionar. Probably more so than Holy Immolation. I think that Azurite Lion, based on what Lionar starts with, right? Because of Divine Bond, because of Roar, Argyon Highmane's Bloodborne spell, I think that Azurite Lion is just going to get you much more value overall, and in the early game, where it's really important to establish dominance and then just snowball from there. Holy Immolation is a very, very close second. There's probably a lot of people, maybe some Lionar mains right now, yelling at the screen because they still believe that Holy Immolation is still priority number 1, and that probably is true. But very, very close. Very, very close. When it comes to games that Azurite Lion will win you and games that Holy Immolation will win you, it's pretty neck and neck. And because Azurite Lion is a common for the purposes of this series, I think you do want to pick those up first. But Holy Immolation is definitely second priority. This is like a Macantor Warbeast. This is one of the most expensive, high priority crafting choices that we do have, but it's well worth it. This is a key card for Lionar. Let me see. Moving on. Sunbloom. is actually on this list. It is a common. Dispelling a 2x2 area on the battlefield can come in handy if your opponent sets up something out of range, if they just have a really strong buffed up ranged unit. Four Winds Magi, Shadow Sister Kaleno, those type of units that are really hard to deal with but are usually played in very defensive spots that you can't get to, especially as Lionar. Sunbloom's going to come through for you. You could probably get away with just 2 copies of it, and it is a common, so you can pick those up on the side. Um, Afterblaze is a really great spell. This card was added in the Shim'Zar expansion, so focusing on getting cards from the core set is the best priority for a new account, because Shim'Zar generally, as I've shown, you're only going to want to cherry pick maybe 1 card, maybe 2 cards from Shim'Zar that a faction really needs, that is really powerful. And Afterblaze is one of those cards, because you only need so few Shim'Zar cards truly to be competitive, that you don't need to really buy Shim'Zar orbs overall, and you can just craft what you need. You can just cherry pick those cards. And Afterblaze combos so well with Silverguard Knight, Windblade Adept, these units that you already have, that you're already going to be running 3 copies of. And then if you combo this with Lycian Brawler / Azurite Lion, Afterblaze is absolutely amazing on Azurite Lion. And so this is probably going to be a high priority craft as well. And then last on our list, we do have the Ironcliff Guardian. It's a rare 3/10 airdrop provoke. It's just a beefy unit that's going to lock down your opponent, and you can play it anywhere because it has airdrop. You can lock down your opponent, or maybe a pesky ranged unit that you don't want to hit you in the face. This thing comboed with Divine Bond lets you burst your opponent for 13, and it's just enormous. I've seen some very recent Lionar lists actually skipping out on the Ironcliff Guardian, so if you get the Azurite Lions and the Holy Immolations and the Afterblazes, you could probably get away with getting the Ironcliff Guardian last, because that's just going to give you the aggressiveness that you need to close out games early before you have to worry about summoning something so big like Ironcliff Guardian. But this is a really strong crafting choice overall for Lionar, something that you're going to want to pick up. To also touch on Helenar while we're here, like Abyssian, it's a secondary Lionar deck type that was bolstered due to the synergy that was added in the Shim'Zar expansion, but the initial cards that you're going to need to make it work are just way expensive and sort of out of reach for newer players at the moment. If you're focusing specifically on Lionar, this becomes a bit more feasible for you to pick up, because you're going to need Sunrisers. Solarius is actually really good in Helenar because it's a combo deck and you're going to need to draw cards. Circle of Life is actually run in Helenar sometimes, 1 or 2 copies. Arclight Regalia is actually on probably at the bottom of this list. It does work, but crafting legendaries is usually really expensive. You have to pay 900 spirit for it. And so it's better overall to just get by on these high value, low cost crafting choices. And then hopefully as you get your gold, you might open Arclight Regalias or enough garbage legendaries that you can just make it yourself. Sunforged Lancer is another card that you're going to want to craft for Helenar, but because it's epic along with Sunriser, it adds a lot of unnecessary bloat to your crafting. So I think that covers it for Lionar. And to move on to Songhai, we've got 3 Inner Focus, 3 Saberspine Seal, 3 Chakri Avatar, 2 Ephemeral Shroud, 3 Healing Mystic, 3 Kaido Assassin, 3 Phoenix Fire, 2 Veil Hunter, 3 Killing Edge, 3 Repulsor Beast, 3 Saberspine Tiger, 3 Widowmaker, 3 Primus Shieldmaster, and 2 Young Flamewing. We've got the Flamewing here because it's a 5/4 with flying. You're able to summon it away from the fight, and then just come in and deal 5 damage to your opponent's face. It's a card that, because you can play it defensively, your opponent might not be able to deal 4 damage to it. It's almost like Arctic Displacer in that way, right? Where you can just play it off on the borders of the fight, away from everything, and then bring it in when you want it to deal its damage. And so your opponent has to waste a lot of resources to kill the Young Flame Wing, or they're going to be forced to take 5 or possibly even 10 damage to the face. Combined with, Killing Edge and all of other Songhai's buffs, this card can cause a lot of trouble for your opponent. We're running 3 Repulsor Beasts as well. I think in all my other lists I was only running 2, but that's because Songhai kind of has trouble dealing with really, really beefy units, and Repulsor Beast is just going to allow you to shove them to the corner where you don't have to deal with them. So to get into our high priority, I keep wanting to say high quality, high priority crafting choices for Songhai, you want to get the Onyx Bear Seal almost right away. This is like the Mechanical War Beast, like the Holy Immolation. You need this to deal with the huge threats that your opponent's going to be summoning that you just can't deal with any other way without having to spend massive amounts of resources on it. Lantern Fox is right behind it, right? You could probably get away with 2 copies of Onyx Bear Seal. You don't need to get all 3, and then pick up Lantern Foxes, because your opponent, especially at lower levels of play, is not going to be able to deal with this properly. They aren't going to have the efficient removals for Lantern Fox, so getting those additional Phoenix Fires is going to let you close out games. And at lower levels of play, Zen Rui isn't as big of a threat, because if this gets stolen with Zen Rui, then it's a huge blowout as the Songhai player. But Lantern Fox is going to get you a lot of value because Zen Rui isn't as big of a threat, and it's still a staple even at higher levels of play, despite the presence of Zen Rui. I do have Mist Dragon Seal and Katara on this list as high priority crafting choices. Katara is a great unit, just 1 mana, 1/3 with Backstab 3. Combined with Mist Dragon Seal, this is going to let you get some really great burst damage. Also gives you the ability to deal with tankier units that you might otherwise struggle against. Mist Dragon Seal is just great overall. You can get a ranged unit out of danger. Giving something +1/+1 might be good enough to get lethal or trade into something really big. So this is just a great spell for Songhai in any case. Primus Fist we do have on the list for this, because Healing Mystic isn't that great for this deck. You want Primus Fist so that you can get your big combos going and push that damage through. We do have also on this list, I can't seem to find it. Where is it? Oh, it's a 0 mana card, Mana Vortex. This is a rare, so this isn't too high priority, but picking these up can also get you some really great combos going. Being able to cast a Phoenix Fire or a Killing Edge for 1 less mana is really good. If you're trying to craft a spell high deck after you get your Lantern Foxes, adding Mana Vortex to the deck is just going to give you an extra proc to buff your Chakri Avatar, get you another ping off of Blood Rage Mask. So those are the cards that we're going to want to pick up for Songhai. And this video has gotten quite long, but hopefully this will set you on the right path. Oops. Oh, the ladder reset. Anyway. Oh, wow. I can't skip this animation. Anyway, we're going to be ending the video here. Another card that I forgot to touch on is actually Dancing Blades. That's one of the best neutral cards that you can actually get. It's a 5 mana 4/6 that deals 3 damage to any minion in front of this. I think I did touch on this a little bit last episode, but Dancing Blades is huge. You're going to want to get 3 of these right away, and because it's neutral, you can use it in any faction and pretty much any deck that you're going to be making for a long time, and you even see Dancing Blades still be played at the highest levels of play. So go ahead and pick up the Dancing Blades alongside whatever high priority options you have selected for your faction of choice, and we'll do a little bit of those in the next episode. So I'll see you then. Have a good one.